Good morning. Buenos dias. Bonjour. Welcome. Welcome, colleagues.
Morning, everyone. Afternoon, good evening. We're glad to see you here. It's a great day, and we know that in just a few weeks we'll be together, either in person or virtually or both. We're looking forward to it. People are still coming in. Another minute. But while you're waiting, please introduce yourselves in the chat. Let us know who you are, where you're from, and whether or not this is the first CSW. Yeah, I think it's time to get started. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here for our NGO CSW forum advocacy training. My co-chair Rosa Lizardi and I attended a meeting this morning with, and it was a pre-CSW convening, a briefing. And Lopa Banerjee, who is the chief of UN Women Civil Society division, gave us some very compelling thoughts. I'm just going to share. CSW70 is beyond policy agenda. It is actually, it actually shows what is sacred. We know that justice systems are fundamentally unjust. So this is a time when global promises and lived realities becomes evident. These statements really give to the importance of CS70 and our as advocates and moving the agenda forward. And that's why this training is so critically important, so that you know what to do before you come to CSW, what to do when you attend in person or virtually, and then what to do afterwards. I want to thank our interns and fellow, Jameson and Mariama, the work on this. And I want to thank my co-chair, Rosa Lazard, for taking the lead with them in producing this wonderful advocacy training. And I will now turn it over to Rosa.
Thank you so much, Pam. I am so grateful and honored to work with you. And welcome, bienvenidos, bienvenidas, bienvenidas. Bonjour, buenos dias, buenas tardes. Welcome to everyone. I don't know all languages, but the ones I do, a warm greeting to you all. Thank you for joining us here at NGO CSW Advocacy Training. It will be a very thorough training, a lot of information. First of all, this is being recorded. So if you need to review, it will be posted on our NGO CSW YouTube channel. And I want to also thank our staff at NGO CSW. You will meet them all in this training, and they've done a fabulous job in providing so much input, so many tools, a lot of information. But if you have any questions, please put the questions in the chat and also comments, because as Pamela said, and Lopa Banerjee and many in Zooms this morning, very inspirational. This is a transformative moment. We can convert this CSW into a transformative moment. And you all are here because you care about gender equality, women's rights, human rights. And for us, this is our primary key agenda. And we are here to provide support, to convene, to coordinate for the CSW, so that we can continue to advance in this agenda that the CSW presents every year. So with that said, I want to introduce Jameson O'Malley, who is a communications admin intern at NGO CSW, who will review the agenda and provide information about today's training. Thank you. Welcome, Jamie.
Thank you. Yeah, so we're just going to start by going over the agenda. We just had our welcome from our co-chairs. Next, we're going to look at the Advocacy Toolkit, which is a tool you can use in all of your advocacy efforts. After that, we'll go a little bit over the CSW and NGO CSW, what all of that means. Then we're going to go look at advocacy at CSW. Specifically, we're going to look at the outcome document, negotiations, everything having to do with that, as well as other ways to advocate. Then we'll go on advocating beyond CSW, what you can do after, different tools you can take away to use in your own advocacy efforts after the forums. Finally, we'll go into a bit about digital advocacy, and I'll take you through how to really build a digital campaign for your efforts. We'll look a little bit more about advocating in your community and kind of a smaller view of little things you can do. And then we'll go into a Q&A for any questions. And so, like I mentioned, starting with the Advocacy Toolkit, NGO CSW releases our toolkit every year. This goes over different things relevant to the process, as well as background info, all the basics, if that's something you're new to. These are just kind of the main subheadings, the basics, intro to the UN, CSW, and NGO CSW forum. After that, we look at advocacy at the UN, that the CSW70 and NGO CSW70 forum, digital advocacy and social media, as well as other ways to advocate. So this training is really kind of taking us through what's in the toolkit, as well as adding more additional information and context. This will be a great resource to reference in the future if you're ever looking to go back to any of this information or have questions about how you can work on advocating in your community. This should be available soon. Definitely keep an eye on our newsletter and our social media channels. I'm going to send our link tree right now in the chat. And so if you're not already signed up for our newsletter, I highly recommend you check out this link and sign up. That's where all of our relevant updates and information is. And that's really your greatest resource to staying involved with NGO CSW. So thank you so much. And I'm going to pass it back over.
Thank you so much, Jamie. So we will be getting into the context of the CSW, and we're going to begin with some information about the Commission on the Status of Women. Next slide, please. Again, colleagues, all of this information will be in the recording. You can look back. We do provide some of this basic information because we have a lot of new people. And so for some of you, this might be basic, very elementary, you're familiar with it. But just please know that we also had a participants training 2 days ago. We are going to have a full-on orientation that includes more information about the platform and the forum. Next week on the 27th, you'll get more information in the chat. Ask any questions in the chat. Our staff is great at responding to every question. So the Commission on the Status of Women, what does it do? It primarily reviews the implementation of the Beijing Platform for Action, which was agreed upon in 1995. And it also bridges the gaps between laws and reality for women by discussing priority themes, emerging trends, and integrating gender perspectives into the intergovernmental work. The Bureau of the Commission changes every year. This year we have Ambassador Maritza Chan Valverde from Costa Rica as the chair, and we have the vice chairs, Flavia Umulisi from Rwanda, Noah Uri from Liechtenstein. Now, these two are the co-facilitators. You'll hear more about the negotiations. We also have from Lebanon, Sama Debuk, and from Romania, Andrea Mocanu. Next slide, please. Just a bit of background in terms of the CSW. It was established in 1946. Now, if you notice, it's a year after the UN was created. And the reason why the commission is the first commission and started so soon after is because there were many women involved in the creation of the UN. So you can Google that history and see from many of the regions, women were involved. And so they got to work noticing, I think we got to focus on women as well, and created this commission. Now, during the years of 47 through 62, it was really setting standards and conventions. In 1975, it was voted that we would have an International Women's Year. And once that was on its way, well, of course, women pushed for more. And, they let us have a decade of women from 1975 to 1985. But we want the whole thing. So, of course, that's our work, and that's what we're fighting for. Next on this, this graph is CEDAW, which is the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, was adopted in 1979. Now, not all countries have adopted this, including where we are right now, the United States, and a few other member states. But this is very important because the secondary theme for this year's commission deals with CEDAW and violence against women and gender-based violence, and eliminating that. Next, we have the Beijing Declaration, which is the really the primary preeminent platform agreement for women's rights. And this is what the commission reviews every year, different themes of the outcomes of the 12 critical areas. You will hear more on that by my colleague. In 2010, we want to mark here the creation of UN Women, and it was the really the work of civil society together with the UN, with member states, with governments, and at that time, the four entities, women's instruments, the Division for the Advancement of Women, INSTRA, which was focused on research, OSAGI is a special office for gender, and UNIFEM collapsed into UN Women. Why is this important now? Because we are seeing developments around perhaps a new creation or collapse, merging of UN Women and UNFPA that is further down for discussion. The priority theme, as you know, for 2026 is, in a nutshell, strengthening access to justice. Next slide, please. I think right here, I'm going to transfer over to my colleague Mutia and introduce Mutia, who, Mutia, welcome. who is a CEDAW fellow, working in her office. Mutia.
All
Floor is
right.
yours.
Thank you so much, Rosa. And I'm going to continue what Rosa has shared in the previous slides. Some of you might be familiar with the NGO CSW and the UN CSW, but for those of you who are new to the CSW experience, welcome. We hope you have a great experience. So we have two different forums here. So our forum, the NGO CSW forum, is a civil society gathering that is parallel to the UN CSW forum. It is conducted outside of the UN headquarters, which will be in the CCUN, the Church Center for the UN at 777 UN Plaza. It is organized by the NGO CSW, us, the civil society organization, and we host virtual and in-person parallel events, which you can join. And I believe my colleague will also send the link to register to the forum in the chat. And we also have other civil society-led events and activities that are that could you could see that are very interesting and covers a lot of topics as well. And we do also have recommendations prepared by the civil society to be included in the CSW outcome document, which will be shared later during the advocacy and research group presentation. So it is already being prepared. And for the UN CSW itself, it is an official UN commission at the UNHQ, which is coordinated by UN Women, and they host official site events organized by UN agencies, member states, CSOs. So if our forum, the NGO CSW forum, has parallel events, the UN CSW forum has what's called side events. And the outcome document, which is negotiated by the member states for this year. The negotiation is pre the forum. So before the forum, it's already been being negotiated, which will be shared later during this session as well. And only ECOSOC accredited organizations can officially register for the UNCSW forum. For the priority team as well, the CSW70 team for this year is to ensure and strengthen access to justice for all women and girls. So the focus is on justice, and including by promoting inclusive and equitable legal systems, eliminating discriminatory laws, policies, and practice, as well as addressing structural barriers. So this is going to be the focus of the CSW70 forum. Other than that, we also have what's called the review team, which is something that we are reviewing from the previous actions that have been taken. The review theme for CSW70 is women's full and effective participation and decision making in public life, as well as the elimination of violence for achieving gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls. Okay, so aside from information about CSW, we have two instruments in the UN that is focusing for advocacy on women. There is the Beijing Declaration and the CEDAW, which both has been mentioned earlier by Rosa. So a bit about the BPFA, or the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. It is a blueprint for advancing women's rights and women's empowerment. It is agreed upon by 189 governments in 1995, and it's more of a soft law, so it's not legally binding. It's more of a moral and political commitments that the member states have agreed. And it has 12 critical areas of concerns, which I will share later in the next slide. And for CEDAW, or the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discriminations Against Women, it is a treaty adopted in 1979, which is also often called the International Bill of Women, for the 189 states that have ratified it. For CEDAW, it is more of a legally binding treaty, which sets the mandatory obligation to eliminate discrimination in all fields. And if the Beijing platform is more of like the agenda, then the CEDAW is more of like a legal foundation and mechanism to force the implementation of the agenda. And so for the Beijing Platform for Action, I've mentioned earlier that there are 12 areas of concerns. Here we can see the 12 areas starting from environment, power and decision making, the girl child, and then we have as well the economy, human rights, education and training, violence against women, women in poverty, institutional mechanism, women in health, armed conflicts, and media. So this framework ensures that no part of a woman's life is overlooked. So it covers like various sectors. And next, let's deep dive into the cities for CEDAW, or which is a movement to implement the CEDAW principles at the municipal level, where they impact daily life. So CEDAW as a legal framework is monitored by what's called the CEDAW Committee, which reviews the country's progress and reports. And it is for the cities for CEDAW itself, it is a movement which encouraged local governments to implement the CEDAW ordinance itself. So for the cities for CEDAW, it began in 1998, where San Francisco became the first municipality in the world to adopt the CEDAW principles into local ordinance. Now we also have Cardiff, which is the first city in Europe to implement the CEDAW ordinance. We also have Nigeria as well. So this movement is growing massively. And why cities for CEDAW? So 3 points here that I would like to raise. The importance of cities for CEDAW is for first rapid and contextual actions, which countries or cities can adapt it based on their local challenges, based on their unique background of the community. And then there's also the accountability, which we oversight and see, for example, through gender analysis and other tools. And then last is tangible impact, which means implementing CEDAW leads to safer cities, decreased violence, and more inclusive public services, which is already proven by the cities that have implemented the cities for CEDAW, the CEDAW ordinance, sorry, such as San Francisco itself. So that's for CEDAW. I'm going to share the mic again to Rosa to move into the next section.
Thank you so much, Mutia. Please, let's show some love. That was a lot of information, but really important information. And Mutia has done a lot great work on CEDAW. So thank you so much. We're going to move into explaining a bit about the outcome document process. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the process leading up to the zero draft, which let's start at the very bottom. Expert group meetings, UN Women convenes expert group meetings. The reports of those meetings feed into the Secretary General's report, but also if your organization, ECOSOC accredited, provided any written report or statement into UN Women by the October deadline, October of last year, then your input was also fed into the Secretary General's report. You will hear from the recommendations that NGO CSW develops through our advocacy and research group. Those recommendations also fed into this process. So the Secretary General's report is delivered to the Bureau of the CSW, which we heard about, which drafts a preliminary draft called the zero draft for negotiations into the final outcome of the CSW, which is called the agreed conclusions. Next slide. So things are a little different this year. And we heard from a meeting this morning, early this morning, from Lopa Banerjee, the chief of the NGO section at UN Women, about why that is. But for those of us who have been following the process, there has been mandated review of CSW by the General Assembly. This happened last year. It is called the CSW revitalization process that has implemented some changes. And one of the concerns raised during that process is that the commission is very tied up with negotiations during the 2 weeks, not leaving much time or room for the high-level dialogues, for the ministerial meetings, for the in-depth discussions. So next slide, please. So what happened this year is we are already right now in negotiations. Usually the drafts are negotiated during the 2 weeks of CSW, but this year the zero draft was out January 22nd. The co-facilitators, again, mentioned Rwanda and Liechtenstein, have been very busy meeting with governments. I'll go very briefly through the process so far. But the zero draft is produces what is called a compilation draft. It is comprised of the input by member states. This means that the original zero draft gets inflated with a lot of input from all the member states that participate. Now they usually participate in different groupings, and I can go over that later. The compilation draft is then provided. Let's go to the next slide, please. Next slide. Okay. So it provides the basis for what is called the first reading, and that is the negotiation on this compilation draft. What is produced out of that is the first revision, or Rev 1, as it's referred to. Now, this first compilation draft, the first reading, have been completed. The Rev 1 was released on February 10th. And we've heard today, that now the second round of negotiations on this Rev 1 have been just finished, and we are expected to have a second draft, a Rev 2, tomorrow, February 20th. that I think you're ahead on the slides. If you can go back. Yes. So the next negotiations are next week, February 25th and 26th, which means that for you all who are hearing about advocacy at this training and are in touch with your governments, now is the time to provide support, or if you're very much into the technical language tinkering and offering and supporting, that now is the time to do it, working probably over the weekend to ensure that governments receive your inputs. And this is very important. So having the advocacy training right now during this time is really an alert for people to be able to engage and support their governments, find out what the government's positions are. We have the Rev 1 that we can put. Now that's going to change tomorrow. So having the Rev 2 and seeing what the positions are of certain governments, supporting your government is very important. They rely on civil society input for these next negotiations. And the hope is to finalize the outcome by the end of February, with the aim to have the agreed conclusions done, adopted the first day of the CSW, Monday, March 9th. Now, all of this is very fluid because we don't know what's going to happen during negotiations. We heard that the co-facilitators only want 2 revisions and then just wrap it up. But it's a very fluid intergovernmental process that obviously we have no control of. The co-facilitators are going to do their best, but they do want to have this wrapped up. And so far that is what I've heard. Next slide. Just so that you know, and you take a look at the draft headings of the agreed conclusions. It's introductory paragraphs, transformative law reform. This is all relating to access to justice, coordination of issues relating to access to justice, prevention, funding, very key, the justice mechanisms, autonomous feminist movements and civil society, legal aid and legal empowerment, technology and digital innovations, research, data, and evidence. These are the headings with a lot of detail in between. So if you are doing the work of negotiations and looking at it closely, these are the sections. I'm going to look at the questions in the chat if there are some, and in the meantime, I'm going to pass over to my colleague, Executive Committee member Marlene McNeil, who's going to be providing more information about the wonderful work that the Advocacy and Research Group has been doing. Marlene, welcome.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Marlene, and as a member of the Advocacy and Research Group, I would just like to touch on some of the recommendations that the group has put together. Previous speakers have gone through most of these items here. We start our research and gather our information beginning last year, and we develop recommendations from all of the input that we get, and we create these recommendations. And we created 8 recommendations, and at the beginning of the year, we created the briefs to match each recommendation. And we encourage everyone to advocate with their member states and place these recommendations in front of them so they know what to use how to negotiate, and what items women are interested in. And this year, our major theme, our priority theme, is access to justice for women and girls. Next slide, please. And here are the recommendations. Expanding transitional justice. We would like our member states to adapt an expanded transitional justice framework to integrate all of the accountability for systemic rights, to mandate truth-telling and documentation, to implement transformative reparations, and guarantee non-recurrence of these various issues. Social justice, recognizing women and girls as agents of change, to center women's leadership, lived experience, and decision-making across policies, reforms, economic arenas, etc. To implement intersectional mechanisms and to invest in reproductive autonomy and movement solidarity to transform institutional conditions that perpetuate inequalities. Economic justice. Systemic reform and social protections are necessary to dismantle unpaid care burdens, wage discrimination, and asset denial that limits the life of many women, especially widows, when it comes to asset denial. We're asking for reform of labor and property laws, expand publicly funded childcare, social protections, and legal services, and to implement and enforce ILO Convention 190 to eliminate violence and harassment in the world of work. The next item, political justice. We're asking civil society to remove barriers we're asking civil society to ask their member states to remove barriers to civic engagement, to ensure mechanisms for remedy, accountability, and safe participation in governments, to expand civic and legal literacy, to establish and fund independent bodies to document, prevent, and prosecute violence against participants in public life. And our third ask is to mandate gender-responsive electoral laws, such as quota mechanisms and enforcement to ensure representative participation. Cultural justice. For cultural justice, we're trying to engage men and boys. We cannot make these changes without men and boys working with us. So we're asking them to shift the norms, to engage men and boys as allies, to challenge toxic masculinity, and to counter digital misogyny. The last item is particularly relevant in this day and age. So we're asking social media platforms to control the abuses and content that normalizes gender-based violence. We're asking to promote alternative, positive role models for men and boys to contest normalized misogyny. We'd like to engage leaders, men and women, to advocate for robust gender justice laws with appropriate penalties and enforcement. The other recommendation, digital justice. We would like our digital platforms to show equality and we would like digital equality as a human rights issue. Laws, infrastructures, and governance must protect women and girls online and ensure access. We need to enforce gender-responsive digital rights, ensure affordable internet and digital literacy programs for girls, rural women, and marginalized groups. We need to require gender impact assessments in AI, data governance, and digital policy with clear accountability mechanisms. And finally, we need to cover online safety. equitable access, data rights, and algorithmic fairness across policy frameworks. The next recommendation, expanding the conceptualization of justice. For this, we need to include social healing and restoration. Legal reforms translate into lived realities backed by cultural transformation. It's a big ask. We need to convene spaces for stakeholders to explore justice's impact and foster collaborative work while minimizing competition. We need to develop quantitative and qualitative indicators to measure cultural shifts towards justice and gender equality, and to communicate grassroots narratives that tracking refashioning of social norms towards just and equitable societies. Our last item or recommendation is CSW revitalization and liquidity and the impact it has on our work. Reforms to the UN financing and governance must preserve UN women, reverse funding disparities, and ensure accountability. Member states must pay their assessed contributions on time and in full. We need to improve UN internal governance and preserve and strengthen UN Women's mandate with assessed, not voluntary, funding to protect long-term gender equity. And with that, I would like to pass on to Rosa, who will introduce the next speaker.
Thank you so much, Marlene. I think in the interest of time, this next slide, we've pretty much reviewed, so we will skip. Let me introduce at this time, dear colleague Fotini Papagiotti, Director of Policy and Advocacy at the International Center for Research on Women. Fotini, welcome. I don't know if I rolled my your name so nicely as you do, but I always love hearing you say it. So thank you so much for being here, and congratulations on your what I understand is a promotion for director now. So bravo.
Thank you so much, Rosa.
Ex NGO CSW executive committee member. So thank you so much for being here, Fotini.
Such a warm welcome. Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here with you again. I was a former member, I am a former member of the executive committee of NGO CSW, and we worked so well together. Great to be here with you all. I will be talking a little bit on how you can engage, all of us here on this call can engage in advocacy during CSW, and then take some time to discuss a little bit more the UN 80 reform proposals, particularly the merger, the proposed merger between UN Women and UNFPA that many of you may have heard about and would like to learn more about. So we can move on to the next slide, please, on advocacy around CSW. CSW can be a very busy, chaotic 2 weeks, especially if you plan to attend in person. And so I think coming as much prepared as possible, and knowing what you're trying to achieve while being in New York for those 2 weeks is very important, especially if you're engaging for your first, second, like in the first few times that you try to do it, it can be hard to figure it out. So coming with a plan is, I think, half of the battle won. And at this point, I would like to also acknowledge that this year in particular, a significant number of feminists from around the world have made the somewhat difficult choice to not attend and not participate in person in New York because of very restrictive travel policies and, visa bans for a number of countries from around the world, security concerns, safety concerns, particularly for representatives from around the world who may identified as members of the LGBTIQ community, or come from countries who are either on the visa ban list or have been identified and targeted from the US administration. So we do acknowledge that there are also these risks and safety concerns around this particular CSW this year. And I know that many of the coalitions who have representatives here in New York and are supporting feminists to travel from around the world are taking these risks very seriously and addressing them in their own coalitions and constituency gatherings as well. But for those of you who are going to attend and will be here, I think it's very important, and these slides will be shared with you on the recording, so I'm going to skim over those, is identifying what you want to get out of this advocacy that you will be doing. What is your ultimate goal that you're trying to advance? Who are the policymakers and stakeholders who can contribute to advancing this goal? So finding your audience and really sharpening the messages that they need to hear. And here I think we also need to think about, of the many possible messages that these policymakers need to hear, how do we prioritize the most urgent, the most salient, or the ones where action can advance faster? So oftentimes we tend to try to pack as much information and as many asks as possible in our advocacy. Maybe a more relevant strategy is really identifying the issues that are the most relevant to your work, the ones that can advance the work more quickly, and the ones that these policymakers that you are targeting are in a position to advance. And so based on that initial assessment, you can develop your strategy, your messaging, your target audience, and identify the opportunities where you can meet with those policymakers and other stakeholders and bring your messages to their attention. We can move on to the next slide, where there are different ways of engaging. There's the outcome document negotiations. Those tend to be very focused on the language that goes into the document. They can be exciting. You are talking to many different people in real time as the negotiations are happening. They can also be somewhat tedious because sometimes you're arguing over three-letter words like putting all before women and girls. So, choose your battles and where you want to focus your attention in this process. There's a lot of informal discussion sessions, some of them hosted by NGO CSW, conversation circles, regional caucuses. You can bring topics and learn more about topics that are more relevant to your work, your region, your local context. You can do wonderful advocacy digitally and use social media, use, formats like videos and reels that go beyond traditional UN language heavy and very, diplomatic advocacy. You can take the issues and make them more relevant and more interesting to different audiences around the world in that way. And again, the levels of engagement. There's the global, UN, intergovernmental, multilateral. Is that the best place for you? Sometimes it's not. It can be very diplomat heavy. It can be very constrained in what it can say and in what ways it can say that. Or you may feel that these more global conversations may not directly link to or affect your regional, your national, your local context. So identifying where in reality is the best fit for you to engage is something you also need to think about as you plan your strategy. And then I think the magic of CSW is actually connecting with other partners, other civil society partners from around the world, seeing how the issues that you care about in your context also connect to other regional and global issues, how they affect communities around the world, where the similarities and where the creative differences are. And I think really that is what revitalizes us to come back to CSW year in, year out. Every year we're here doing this work because we connect with feminists from around the world. I think that level of connection and magic you won't necessarily get from a UN representative or from a whatever country diplomat. It mostly comes from those connections and from, seeing the General Assembly hall filled with feminists when the Secretary General has his town hall. I think that level of energy, honestly, we don't get it at any other time in the UN. Even with UNGA, when it's like super global and everyone's here, it's a different vibe. I think we really bring a different sense of what's possible in the UN. Do they listen to us? Not always. But we do descend on the UN for these 2 weeks, and we just bring a different level and a different energy to it. Next slide, please. So tips and methods. Again, I'm not going to go into too much detail. We've covered some of it. Plan your approach. Plan. It really helps as you're running around town, from one meeting to the next, doing what I call the CSW math, which is like, if I leave this event 15 minutes early and run at double my usual pace, I can make it to this other event for the last 20 minutes. And it's crazy. So bring a plan with you. Who are your main actors? Who's your audience? Who are you trying to reach? Is this the best time to reach them? Honestly, it's a time when everyone is just running around. Is this the most influential time to meet them? Maybe you can just have a quick check-in with them now, but your main messages and arguments need to happen at some other time. This is, counterintuitive to what I'm trying to say here, but it's also important to think, when is the best moment to reach this person? Why is this important? Why is my message important? And what's the best way to bring that message to the attention of the people I want to reach? And so during the discussions, that's another. Can I ask a huge favor of all of us? Stick to time. Please do not go over time. Do not try to cram as many messages as possible to the 5 minutes that you're given. And then you're rushing and you're reading in this monotone, let me get through this all, and no one is able to follow what you're saying. Better, again, to bring 3 clear, strong messages rather than try to fit 15 messages in your 5 minutes and then everyone's left with like, what was this person trying to say? Clear, relevant information, and again, the magic of CSW, connections. What are the events where I need to be to listen in and to just meet someone new? What are some events that I wouldn't usually go to because I don't know those people? And this work is kind of adjacent to what I do, but not necessarily directly linked. That's where the magic happens. You sit in a room, you're half listening, and then all of a sudden you pick up information that is very relevant to your work, and you hear about this new person that you didn't know about, and now you can connect and bring a new angle to how you view the work and how you're doing the work. Next slide, please. Action plan for back home. First step to this, once you go back home, I really advocate for take the time to rest. You will be exhausted. You will be tired. You will be thinking, I spent 2 weeks there or however many days running around, listening to all of this information. What have I retained from this information? not much. So also a tip for myself also, figure out which way works best for you for how to retain the, the deluge of information that you'll be getting bombarded at you. Just figure out, how do I best save what I need to create that action plan when I go back home? Next slide, please. You can disseminate the agreed conclusions, get chunks from what's relevant to your work, socialize the content. You can engage your government. Good luck with that. And we're always happy to support where we can. Create the messages, highlight the areas, make some noise around what commitments your government made and how they're planning to meet those commitments and implement them. Demand the action where it's safe to do so. And then start tracking where commitments are moving and how implementation is happening. I love all the very practical tips in the chat as well. I think those should be saved and shared about the weather being unpredictable. Do not bring your heels unless you're a very committed to high heels person. That's usually my first day. After that, I'm like all sneakers. And next slide, please. And now we're getting to the big topic of the UN80 reform agenda. So I think, if you've been living on this planet for the past couple of years, you may have heard that the UN is facing a liquidity crisis. Member states are withholding funds. There's more and more limited funding available to do the work that the UN is tasked to do. In the meantime, the UN tends to grow and grow and grow, both in structure and in reach and intended, outcomes. So the two do not match. There's very limited funding available to do the ballooning, priorities that the UN identifies for itself and that member states put on the UN and ask the UN to deliver. So to respond to this challenge, the current leadership, the SG and the DSG, announced this UN80 reform process, which would, technically look to streamline all of these processes, identify where there are opportunities for efficiencies and improvements, review the mandates that currently the UN has been given by member states and how they're being implemented, to see which ones are outdated, which ones are duplicates, how can they improve the impact of this mandate implementation. And all of that will be underpinned by some structural changes and program realignment. And in this third structural reform process is where precisely efforts to consolidate agencies have been sitting, particularly around the UN Development Program and the UN OPS, which is like the operational entity for the UN, and the one that's very relevant to the work that we care about, the merger between UN Women and UNFPA. So where we stand now with this proposed merger, of course, civil society from the beginning has called for transparency, how this decision was made to focus on this specific, merger and put it out there as a proposal that would immediately reduce inefficiencies and improve effectiveness, although we do not have public evidence of where are these inefficiencies with regards to these two specific agencies. So we called for more transparency, we called for more meaningful engagement in this process. If this proposal is being put forward, how is civil society being included in these conversations and providing the feedback that is needed? And so we have had a long process with town halls between the DSG and the executive directors of the two entities and civil society, where we brought some significant concerns around this. And they tried to respond to some of those. Currently, there is a formal assessment that has been commissioned and is being underway. The two entities have kind of welcomed this assessment, and this will analyze the feasibility, the potential benefits, the principal risks, and some possible merger pathways. The latest we have heard on this is it is still in progress, but will be released soon and brought to the member states for their consideration. Supposedly, civil society was going to be involved in the consultations. I have not heard of anyone in my extensive networks being approached for a formal consultation. I'm assuming that the town hall that they held is what they consider consultations with civil society. If anyone else has different information, please feel free to drop it in the chat. And so we also have had the UN Women Executive Board yesterday and today, and the joint UNDP, UNFPA, UNOPS executive boards in early February. Member states have engaged there with statements and discussions. They have referenced this evolving structural reform agenda. And so what we're hearing and what we're seeing emerge from member state positions in these meetings is that they continue to want to remain engaged, but they are cautious about these proposals. They are very worried, like us, civil society, particularly around the dilution of the mandates that this potential merger could open up. And they have repeatedly asked for evidence-based, transparent, and comprehensive approaches and engagement in this process. They want to safeguard the mandates and the effectiveness of these two entities and whatever new entity emerges from this proposal. And they have called for rigorous analysis. Any structural change must be grounded in this transparent and evidence-based analysis. Of course, as civil society, as I said, we have particular concerns around the mandate dilution, the funding risks. It does not look likely, and we have no reassurances that a new entity will absorb the funding of the two existing entities and will grow the budget. We fear that donors will just default to reducing the budget for one entity and just take away those funds. And then the weakening of the institutional focus, especially around sexual and reproductive health and rights and the gender equality delivery. So procedurally, where we are now, there is no finalized decision or a merger plan adopted yet, at least not publicly reported, because behind closed doors, there's lots of rumors flying around. The plan is that sometime later this month or early March, the results of the assessment will be brought to the member states. Member states can then start negotiations around their recommendations, and the timeline will likely feed into the General Assembly consultation and decision-making process. I don't know how much time I have left, actually. Rosa, if we have a few more minutes, we can discuss what civil society has been coordinating to do in this process. Very briefly, we understand that
I think that would be good. Yeah.
right now there is a larger feminist coordination group around this process that's bringing together some feminist and women's rights constituencies, such as the Women and Gender constituency, the Women's Rights Caucus, the Young Feminist Caucus, the International Sexual and Reproductive Rights Coalition, and the Women's Major Group. We just want to make sure we're not all reacting in isolation and we can amplify our impact. We're more of a shared information hub and action platform, and we have worked together to circulate sign-on letters. We have organized webinars to socialize these proposals and what they mean. And now we're pivoting to a very heavy member state focused advocacy, where we continue providing member states whom we see as aligned with our concerns and vision for this process, and also a little frustrated with the lack of transparency and meaningful engagement from the part of the leadership in the United Nations. And so we're giving them all of this information, the analysis of our concerns, very concrete guidance on what questions they need to be asking in the executive boards, and how to strengthen the language where they make it clear that they are the ones with responsibility around decision making on this process, and they have very concrete requests of the leadership around what they need to be assured of before they make any decisions. Informally, we're hearing that this pressure has been working, where before the end of 2025, all the leadership across the board was fully committed to presenting a unified front to this is the only way forward. We're now seeing some cracks. And I think now is the time, if you're engaging and if you are advocating on this, to continue putting the pressure and the public pressure on, this is just looking at one option and presenting it as the only viable option without adequately assessing the risks. And so member states also have asked for a range of options, not just this merger proposal. So I think now is the time when, if we relax the pressure, this could quickly be pushed through. But if we continue showing a unified, civil society and member states share these concerns, and we're not being fully, included into the deliberations and given the information that we need to make an informed choice, we cannot let this proceed. I think now is the moment for this to happen. And this is something, if you are in New York for CSW and engaging with governments and UN entities, you can continue strengthening that message and that unified request for more transparency and information before any of this goes forward. I'll pause here. I know I've taken up a lot of time, contrary to what I was saying earlier. I hope this was helpful, and please feel free to reach out for any follow-up questions, engagement, and if you're in New York during CSW, happy to try to meet.
Thank you so much, Fotini. This is very important because some of us cannot engage in the negotiations right now. So what are we going to do at the CSW while we're there and afterwards? So thank you so much for all that information. We are part of the efforts in ensuring that we bring information and we provide this space. We have scheduled this dialogue. We're calling it Uncharted Future, UN Charted Future. And please note the time and date. And now I'm going to bring, here, Jamie is back. Thank you, Jamie. So give us the tools, highlight the tools first. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for all of that wonderful information. We're going to move on a little bit more into looking at methods of advocacy. So for here, we're going to talk a little bit about digital advocacy. So you'll find this also in our toolkit once that's available. But we have 5 key steps for advocating online, which is kind of like a guideline you can follow along with to help you build your strategy for online, since so much of the world is online these days. It's always a good place to promote your events, your causes, things you're working on. So I'll go through these briefly. The first step would be defining your goals. We have a lot of guiding questions you can ask yourself in here, such as who am I trying to reach? So that could be youth, that could be people from a certain region, things like that. What am I trying to accomplish, and what would I like people to do? So would you like them to come to your event? Would you like them to go out into their own communities and advocate? Would you like them to visit your website? Things like that. And so once you kind of define your goals, you can move on to the next step. So the next step would be choosing your platforms. Of course, as we all know, likely there are many different social media platforms out there with many different purposes and uses. It can be a little bit overwhelming to choose which ones to post on, as well as to post on all of them. So you'll find in the guide where we have a brief section going over a lot of the main different platforms and kind of what their best use is for and their best audience target is. For example, Instagram and TikTok both are really good for reaching youth audiences, while Facebook is great for reaching a slightly older audience. TikTok is great for video content, whereas Instagram is better for video and photo. Twitter is good for text content. So things like that, kind of just to familiarize you with the platforms and kind of help you understand where you want to share your info. The next step would be creating your design. We also have a lot of resources for design in the guide that I highly recommend checking out, such as different programs where you can create, as well as resources for getting videos, photos, audio assets, things like that. But two quick things to consider. One would be branding. It's really important to have a consistent brand voice and aesthetic for you so that people, once they see your design, they don't even need to look into it. They'll know who they're seeing work from. As well as readability. We want things to be approachable and to be accessible for all people. So this can be looking at things like contrast. Is someone who has vision difficulties able to read what I'm trying to put out there? Am I giving different, I know we had for translations, for example, in the chat, that makes things accessible to a wider community. So really taking those things into consideration when you're designing is important, and it'll contribute to who's able to see what you're putting out there. Next would be writing your copy. For those who don't know, copy is basically means your text. So this could be your caption on Instagram. This could be your description on YouTube, anything like that. So some things to consider with your copy are tone. How do you want to sound? You could decide you want to sound very professional, organizational. So this could be a more formal tone. On the other hand, you could decide to go for a more approachable tone. So this could be a little bit more friendly, a little bit more casual. Length, it's important to kind of keep things a little bit brief. We'll talk about this more in the toolkit as well, but people have a very short audience or a short attention span these days. So it's important to kind of get your main info out there quickly. So keeping it brief, making sure you're explaining things concisely is important. And then accessibility is similar to kind of what we talked about, but making it approachable to a large audience. Of course, we want our messages to reach as many people as possible. So we have to in turn put it out there in a way that makes it accessible to as many people as possible. So thinking about that, thinking about if someone isn't a native speaker of my language, will they be able to understand my post? Things like that. And then finally, we have engaging with your audience. A lot of these social media platforms run on algorithms, and algorithms run on engagement. So this means replying to comments and DMs, commenting on other people's posts, following organizations with similar missions and things like that will all boost your content and your profile to other people with similar interests, and it'll allow that algorithm to just give you that extra boost and allow you to connect with your community. So these are all really important. And once again, I know we're going over it pretty quickly right now, but there'll be more information about this in the toolkit, and it'll be more in depth as well. So you can click through that. And then next slide, please. And these are just some additional considerations to go along with that. So for one, we have automation. Of course, it can be a lot of time and a lot of effort to post on various different platforms and to keep up to date with it. So there's a lot of different schedulers you can use. These are like content calendars, and there's a lot of free options as well. Those will be linked in the advocacy toolkit, but they can allow you to schedule posts months in advance so that you don't even have to think about it. You can spend a day or two doing that, which is super helpful. Types of content is also a really important consideration. And this kind of goes back into what we were talking about, what's your goals and what kind of platforms you want to share. But I had a brief overview here of photos and flyers. They're great for promoting an event, promotional material, or just sharing information. Videos are great for Instagram and TikTok, and they're another way to share more in-depth information. It's also great for highlighting good moments of an interview or an event or something like that. And then text-based posts are obviously great for sharing information, breaking down complex ideas, or starting conversations and calls to actions. In terms of design resources, like I touched on earlier, these will be in the toolkit as well. Canva is a great, really easy to use platform for creating flyers. And then I also included some resources for sounds, photos, videos, things like that. And finally, education. The media landscape is constantly changing, and it's always really important to stay up to date with what's happening, what do you need to know to influence your strategies for advocating online. So we included some guides in the toolkit as well with resources. There's pretty much everything you could ever ask for, including templates for posting, ideas for what kinds of posts you can do, as well as up-to-date information on updates and happenings within social media. So I highly recommend checking that section out. And then I think I'm going to pass it over to Mariama to close us out.
Hi everyone. Yes, so we also want to highlight other ways to advocate because it's not just, UN or the NGO forum. You can also advocate within your community. So one way that we have that is volunteering and making sure you're networking in your community. So just taking part in whatever you have close by, like a soup kitchen or a pantry, whatever you have nearby. Another way is joining a nonprofit or any community organization. So our NGO is an NGO, but you can join a nonprofit nearby in your community and also advocating through the arts. So creating through music, like in my nearby neighborhood, we have a children's a children's center, and they do music and artwork, and they reach out to the community and just create spaces for people to just come in and like communicate. And then also voting, which is very important, and making sure you're contacting your local representatives. And we want to highlight some other considerations that can change. So such as tailoring to your environment. Jamie talked about like reaching out to like older generations using like Facebook or different social media platforms. So understanding who you're communicating with. So older generations, if you're a part of a rural community, how can you reach them in a more accessible manner instead of just using technology? And then also understanding who your community is, like what is the history, what is the content, or what is the issue that you're discussing, how can they be more knowledgeable on it, and how can you be more knowledgeable on it, and how can you share that knowledge with everyone. So some tips that we have like right below that is going offline, using pamphlets, using booklets, using art in any sort of way, and also creating town halls so everyone can have a discussion and opening up that dialogue, and also making sure that you're centering your local successes. What is happening in your community? How has people been successful in advocacy in your local community, and how can you use that to propel your issue? And also we want to make sure that you are understanding and adapting to global climate and UN changes. So making sure you stay informed and engaged, diversifying your support, focusing on intersectionality, leverage civil society protocols, anticipate budget realities, monitor tech shifts, and most importantly, use your community, making sure you're networking and understanding how can you get your voice out there. And Mutia, next slide. Yes. And we, throughout the CSW, we have beyond the parallel events, we have many other events going on. So we just want to highlight that we have consultation day, the beginning of that first week on March 8th. And we have the fundraising reception right after that on March 10th. We have conversation circles. It's 4 in person. It will be on March 10 on Tuesday 2 there. And then on March 12th on the Thursday. And there will be a pre-registration, which we will have out. And then next we have the civil society briefings. We have 5 in total. 2 will be in the UN and 3 will be in the church center. And then we have the Rainbow Caucus on Mondays from 2 to 4 in the church center in person as well. And as we mentioned before, the UN charted future dialogue, which is on March 18 in also the church center. And we also want to note that there will be a time change in the first week on March 8th. So the hour will go 1 hour ahead. So just make sure you plan that accordingly. And Jamie has graciously put all the hyperlinks inside of the chat. So you can register for all of these events as well. And we will also go on to the next slide where we will bring back our co-chairs and all of our speakers to answer any questions you may have. And thank you all for joining us.
Thank you very much, Mariama, and Jamie as well for sharing the other ways to advocate. We are going to move on to the Q&A session. So if Any of you has any questions, feel free to either raise your hand and we can let you speak. Oh, okay, there's one. Mary Rose.
Hello there from rainy, cold Northern California. I want to just say that this has been an excellent presentation. All of you have done an incredible job. Thank you so much. One thing I wanted to ask is some of us here from the US want to make sure that we are included if there is any possible time or invitations to meet with the US mission. Our voices are important, and some of us have been left out the last time under, Trump's administration. So if there's a way that we could somehow coalesce around meeting together and trying to influence and at least have discussions with the US delegation, I think that would be important, even from women from who are not in the US. I think our voices need to be heard from a diplomatic perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Um, Thank you very much, Mary Rose, for the information. Oh, Rosa, would you like to share something?
Well, just to thank Redwood Mary for that information and point and question. As mentioned, maybe in the chat, we have written to the US mission requesting a meeting, the co-chairs. We feel that since we are based here in the US, it's very important to make that contact. We have not heard back, but we can continue to keep trying and see if there's any response. Thank you for putting that information about the Jonathan Spear from the US mission. That liaison is to the UN Women Board. So we will continue to attempt that.
Yes, I actually encourage people to go to the US State Department US Mission website. That's where I found that information. Thank you.
Great. There is a question about the civil society briefings in the chat. Pamela, do you want to take that question? The question is, can you explain more about the civil society briefings? Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for that question. We're going to have a series of civil society briefings, and unlike previous years, they are not going to all be in the UN because of the austerity measures we have been given to have the civil society briefings in the UN. So on Wednesday, March 11th, we will be from 1:15 to 2 o'clock. And this information can be found in Hula, as well as it will be on our website. And then on Tuesday, and the second week, we will be in the UN, the same lunchtime timing. So other than that, we're going to have days in the church center on the second floor, 8:30 in the morning on Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday of the first week. And then on Thursday of the second week, we're going to have a virtual convening as a wrap up, where we'll be able to share information and really have an overview of what transpired and where we need to go. Because I think that what we all are going to need is some direction for when this is over. How do we continue, whether the lights stay on in July or not? What is it that is going to be critically important for us to do to keep this movement alive and to keep us involved? So please check the Hoover app as well as the website, and the topics are going to be Madam Secretary General. We are also going to have a session on the Crimes Against Humanity Treaty that we know includes gender items. We're also going to have a look at the agreed conclusions because we know there are no negotiations during CSW. The negotiations are taking place before. So we're going to take a look at the agreed conclusions. And we think that we will have a robust schedule of brief. Thank you. And Sheila has a question.
This has been a great presentation. Thank you all so much. I've been attending for 12 years and I come on my own. I started coming through Presbyterian Women, which is a part of Ecumenical Women. My question is on CEDAW. I will be coming both virtually and I will be coming in person because of the cost. But there is an event for CEDAW that the presentation was given earlier that I would like to participate with, but I don't know if I will be there in person on the 11th. So will that be done via Zoom? And my last question, Pamela, is that I have been trying to get my reception ticket. I've been sending messages to Jamie and I put in purchase one ticket and the cost is coming up as $270 and I can't figure what to do.
Yeah.
So that's a two-part question. Will I be able to view that CEDAW event via virtually or is it only in person? And then about my ticket, the reception ticket.
Yeah, I just sent you a follow-up. I think I figured out how to remove it. You'll see on the checkout page there's a cart icon in the corner. If you click on that icon, you should be able to remove it. If that doesn't work, send me another message and I'll try and figure that out for you. But just check your messages. I think I just sent a message about that.
Yeah, I saw that message and I tried and it's not working. Put it-
Not the 0. It was a follow-up message. I just sent it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So my CEDAW question now answered. Thank you.
Thanks, Jameson. Sheila, unfortunately, the bandwidth in the church center does not allow us to comfortably have hybrid events. So for that reason, the CEDAW event is not going to be a hybrid. However, we encourage you to come. It's going to be fabulous. Luthia is our intern, and she has done a marvelous job of putting together a compelling, interesting program. Luthia, do you want to talk a little about the program?
Right. Thank you so much, Pamela and Sheila. Thank you so much for the question and interest in the CEDAW event. So we will have a Cities for CEDAW Global Leadership Award session, which we've been conducting the past few years. And for the 2026 award, it will be given to the LA County, and we will have a panel session on that as well, and an opportunity for all of you to learn more about how to implement CEDAWs in your local government and your local community. And I just shared the registration link and the information about the event in the chat box. It will be conducted on Thursday, 12 March, at the CCUN, the Church Center for the UN, at 10:30 to 12 p.m. So if you are interested and will be able to join in person, we would love to have you as well.
Thank you.
And before we turn it back over to Jameson, I want to make a shameless plug for our consultation day. It's going to be International Sunday, the 8th of March, 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock, and it will be virtual. And we are so excited. We are giving our Woman of the Year award to Kimberly Crenshaw, who those of you may know her name. She is the person who did the research on intersectionality. And because of her research, we have incorporated that term into our jargon. So we are giving Kimberly Crenshaw the Woman of the Year award, and we are also having a wonderful, diverse lineup of entertainment. So, as well as compelling panels. We have an expert panel where we have the people who comprise the expert groups for UN Women during their investigation of the theme. We have experts from the experts group, and we are having a high level panel, and then we're having a compelling youth panel. So please find the link on our website for consultation day, and please join us. Thank you.
What was the time?
10 to 1, 10 a.m. Eastern time to 1 p.m. Eastern time. And there will be translation.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're going to close it out, right, Jamie?
Yeah, I think with that, we are all good to finish. If Rosa or Pamela, you want to close us out?
Okay, well, please, I invite you to turn on your videos, open your videos, and open your mics. We are going to first end with our slogan, Equality, Peace, Justice Now, and then everyone in their own unique language way of saying goodbye. So what do we want? Equality,
Equality,
peace,
peace,
justice.
justice
Justice.
When do we
now.
want it?
Yeah.
Now.
Now.
What do we want?
Equality,
Equality,
peace,
peace,
Justice.
When do
Justice.
we want it?
Now.
Oh, all right.
Hey.
Gracias. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Gracias. Thank you so much for
Thanks
this.
for
Very
being with
helpful.
us. We will see you at the CSW. Thank you.
Look
Bye.
Adios.
Great
Everyone,
job,
goodbye.
interns. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Hasta
Appreciate the
luego.
digital